All right, let's just jump right in. When you think of elite special forces, what pops into your head? Probably something straight out of a movie, right? Shadowy figures, the best gear, moving like ghosts. We call them Deltas, SEALs, SAS, and in our minds, they're practically superhuman. They're these units where discipline and prep have just eliminated chaos. They're the surgeons of war, making one perfect cut and vanishing. The heroes who always get it done.
And this quote right here, it pretty much nails that whole myth. It paints a picture of a world with no mistakes, a place where the planning is so perfect and the skill is so high that nothing can possibly go wrong. We really want to believe they operate in this little bubble of perfection. But, as we're about to see in this explainer, that idea isn't just a little off, it's a complete misunderstanding of what these units are even for.
Yeah, the reality is the exact opposite. Special forces don't get sent to the easy places. They're sent into the heart of chaos and uncertainty because nothing is certain. They don't operate where mistakes aren't supposed to happen. They operate where mistakes are practically guaranteed, and where one tiny slip-up can be absolutely catastrophic. And when things do go wrong, man, they unravel in ways that make you question everything you thought you knew about what makes a unit elite.
So, for our first case study, let's go back to October 3rd, 1993, to the streets of Mogadishu, Somalia. The country was in total chaos, torn apart by civil war and famine. A powerful warlord, Mohammed Farah Aidid, was causing all sorts of problems for the UN humanitarian mission. So a special task force, U.S. Army Rangers and Delta Force guys, was sent in. The mission was called Operation Gothic Serpent, and the goal was pretty straightforward. Grab a few of Aidid's top guys. But we all remember it by another name, don't we? Black Hawk Down. And this operation is just a brutal, unforgettable lesson in how a plan for surgical precision can get smashed to pieces by reality.
Just look at this slide. It cuts right to the chase, laying out the plan versus the reality in the simplest terms. So, the plan? It was a classic snatch and grab. You've got helicopters swooping in, Delta operators hitting the target building, and Rangers roping in to lock down the perimeter. Grab the targets, load them onto a convoy of Humvees, and be back at the base in under an hour. Simple, right? Well, the whole thing was built on some really shaky assumptions. Planners thought their helicopters made them invincible. They figured the local militia was just a disorganized mob. And, crucially, they assumed that if anything went wrong, they could just fly right out. Every single one of those assumptions was about to blow up in their faces.
So here's how that perfect plan turned into a complete nightmare. At 1542, the mission starts. And believe it or not, it goes well at first. The assault force hits the building, they get their guys. But then the city erupts with a fury nobody saw coming. And then, at 1620, not even 40 minutes in, a Somali fighter fires a rocket-propelled grenade, an RPG. It hits the tail rotor of a Black Hawk, Super 6-1. The helicopter just spins out of control and slams into the city. And in that one single moment, the entire mission flips upside down. It's not a capture mission anymore, it's a rescue. And as the soldiers on the ground fight their way to the crash site, just 20 minutes later, it happens again. Another RPG. Another Black Hawk, Super 6-4, goes down. Now the Americans are scattered, trapped between two crash sites, surrounded, and with night coming on, they are just fighting to survive.
You know, the craziest thing about Mogadishu is that the soldiers themselves didn't fail. I mean, the individual acts of heroism were just unbelievable. Think about Gary Gordon and Randy Shugart, who asked to be put down at the second crash site knowing it was a one-way trip. No, the failure was systemic. It was born from overconfidence and just bad assumptions. The lesson, written in blood, was that all the high-tech gear in the world doesn't protect you from the raw unpredictability of a street fight. After this, everything changed. The idea of sending unarmored Humvees into a hot zone? Gone. Contingency planning, the what-if game, became an obsession. Mogadishu forced the military to remember that you have to plan for the worst case, not just hope for the best.
But you know, the enemy isn't always a militia fighter with an RPG. Sometimes the deadliest thing a mission faces is its own complexity. Which brings us to a desert in Iran, April 1980. For months, 52 Americans were being held hostage in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. Diplomacy wasn't working. So, President Carter greenlit a hugely risky rescue mission, Operation Eagle Claw. The plan was incredibly audacious, involving all different branches of the military in a multi-stage operation. It was also so ambitious it was basically a house of cards, ready to collapse at the slightest breeze.
This slide shows you exactly how that house of cards fell apart. The plan needed 8 Navy helicopters to fly to a secret landing zone called Desert 1, refuel from some C-130s, and then fly Delta Force into Tehran. Right from the start, things went south. One helicopter broke down before it even left the carrier. Another had to turn back. A third got lost in a massive, unexpected dust storm and had to abort too. Suddenly, they're on the ground with only 5 working choppers, one less than the absolute minimum they needed. The The mission's a no-go. They call it off. But the disaster wasn't over. As they were getting ready to leave, one of the helicopters, trying to move in the dark and the dust, drifts right into a C-130, a massive fireball. 8 servicemen are killed. The mission didn't just fail, it ended in tragedy before a single operator got anywhere near the hostages.
But the real problem wasn't the dust storm, or a broken part. The wreckage at Desert 1 was just a symptom of a much deeper sickness in the US military at the time. This mission was basically a pickup game. You had Army guys, Navy helicopters, Air Force planes. The problem? They'd never really trained together. They had different radios, different procedures, different ways of doing things. There was no single person in charge of the whole show. It was a committee. And in a crisis, a committee is just a recipe for disaster.
And this right here, this is the critical takeaway. The total humiliation of Eagle Claw forced the U.S. military to take a long, hard look in the mirror. Congress passed huge reforms demanding that the services actually learn to fight together. And out of all that, a brand new organization was born, U.S. Special Operations Command, or SOCOM. For the first time, all the elite units, SEALs, Green Berets, Delta Force, all of them, were put under one roof, with one commander, one budget, one standard. It's maybe the clearest example of how a catastrophic public failure can force incredible positive change. Failure literally created the modern special operations community we have today.
It's not always about enemy fire or bad plans, though. Sometimes the mission fails because of an enemy you can't fight, you can't trick, you can't reason with. The environment itself. Weather, terrain, just plain old geography. It can be just as deadly as any human opponent.
Take the Falklands War in 1982. A team from the British SAS was supposed to parachute onto a glacier for a recon mission. But as they were about to jump, a monster storm hit. We're talking hurricane-force winds, freezing cold. They went ahead with the jump, but the team was scattered all over the ice. Guys got injured, gear was lost. The mission was a total bust, and they were lucky to even get rescued. They weren't defeated by an Argentinian soldier, they were beaten by the wind.
And you see the same thing in the mountains of Afghanistan in 2005, during Operation Red Wings. You probably know it from the book and movie Lone Survivor. A 4-man Navy SEAL team was inserted deep into the mountains to track a Taliban leader, but the terrain itself became the enemy. The mountains were so steep, so rugged, there was nowhere to hide. Their position was given away by some local goat herders, which led to a devastating ambush. The terrain trapped them, and it made it almost impossible to call for help. It was a brutal lesson that no matter how tough you are, you can't beat geography.
So what's the thread that connects so many of these stories? Well, it's this concept right here, asymmetric warfare. It's what happens when a big, high-tech army goes up against a smaller, local force. The smaller guys know they can't win a head-on fight, so they don't. They refuse to play by the big army's rules. They use what they have, knowledge of the terrain, local support, and simple but deadly tactics like RPGs or IEDs to go after the big army's weaknesses. They turn their opponent's strength into a liability. They're fighting on their home turf, and it is proven again and again to be the great equalizer.
Okay, so we've walked through a street battle in Mogadishu, a wreck in the Iranian desert, and guys getting beaten by the weather. So what's the real lesson here? Is it that these super elite units aren't actually so elite? No, not at all. That's the easy answer. The real takeaway is something way more interesting.
We have to stop seeing these disasters as shocking exceptions. In a weird way, they are the rule. They're just reminders that these units are sent to places where what military nerds call friction is at its absolute peak. Friction is just everything that can and will go wrong between the plan and the reality. It's bad intelligence, bad weather, bad luck, human error. It's all of it. These guys don't run into failure because they're unskilled. They run into it because they are designed to operate right on the ragged edge of what's possible. And that brings us to the most important point of this whole thing. We, the public, see a failed mission as a tragedy, an embarrassment. But inside these communities, that failure instantly becomes something else. It becomes priceless data. There's this process called an after-action review, or AAR. And in an AAR, every single mistake is put under a microscope, not to blame anyone, but to learn. The data from Mogadishu changed how soldiers were equipped and trained. The data from Eagle Claw created an entire command. Every failure is basically a lesson that gets logged, studied, and used to get better.
So maybe we've been looking at this all wrong. We want to see these units as perfect, with a flawless record. But maybe the true sign of an elite organization isn't perfection. Perfection is a myth. It's fragile. Maybe what really makes a unit elite isn't that they never fail, but that they have a relentless, brutally honest ability to learn from their absolute worst moments. It's about being able to take a catastrophic punch, turn that pain into knowledge, and make damn sure that same mistake never happens again. It's not about never falling down, it's all about how you get back up.